Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Chiss Ascendancy. This is episode 104. If Samuel were here, he would make that joke for the 1,000th time that we made it. I said that one time.
We made it. 3-5. We made it.
And he will not let it go.
Welcome to the Chiss Ascendancy podcast.
We have an exciting episode for you guys. We are going to jump in, and tonight we are focusing on reviewing hopefully what ends up becoming season 1 of the Skeleton Crew. As of right now, it's just all we have, but hopefully a second season is on the way. And I am joined tonight by two good friends. On one side of me, I've got Joel, aka Radis Forstad. He is actually from Canada, so we are spanning the globe tonight. We are in multiple countries, which is pretty cool. And then on my other side, I've got Finn from Findor Moon. He's been on the show before, and the three of us have a very fun group chat. We all met through toy photography and love of Star Wars and all that good stuff. And so we're going to dive into. We're going to review the season, give our thoughts, talk about the finale and everything. But first, breaking news. So we've got some great news articles here. A couple of things. So earlier this week, I've been trying to cover this as this stuff has come out. I don't actually particularly care for the short form green screen, like fuzzy background kind of thing. I think it's cheesy.
What?
I don't like doing it, but it gets engagement, and yeah, I feel like Anchorman. Like I'm just going to say the wrong thing, and it's just going to be out there for the world to hear. But first things first, I did not include this in the notes, but I remembered it as we were getting ready to go on. We have officially got our casting for Baylan Skoll in Ahsoka season 2, and we have got Rory McCann. And for those of you who are listening who don't know who that is, if you have been living under a rock and have never heard of Game of Thrones, even if you haven't seen it, surely everyone's heard of it. He plays a character named the Hound. Probably one of the better, more well-rounded characters, a lot of character development for that guy. And he is, I've heard this term several times this week, that he is a sex icon in the UK. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't care to have that in my Google search history, but I'll take their word for it. But what are y'all's thoughts? Joel, I'll start with you. What's your take on this guy replacing, obviously, rest in peace, the late Ray Stevenson? What are your thoughts on our new version of Baylan Skoll? How do you think it's going to go?
I think that the fan casting of Liev Schreiber was maybe a little bit closer in looks, especially once you add the hair and the beard. But this could work. I've seen a couple like red carpet type photos of this actor, and I could see it. You get the right makeup crew in there, you get the costume on. I think it's close enough.
Yeah. And Finn, I don't recall if you're a Game of Thrones guy or not, but the Hound has such a, it's kind of strange because the Hound has he's a little bit more bitter than Baylan, but they both have that personality of like they're wishful thinkers for what they wish the world was like, and Baylan's a little bit more religious or I don't know, methodical, more like a monk, whereas the Hound's just like cussing people out left and right. What are your thoughts?
The Hound's an absolute freaking unit, dude. Like
Yes.
that guy is insane. The good part is we know that this guy knows how to swing a sword. He's very good at it in Game of Thrones. And especially since Balin in Ahsoka, like his lightsaber style is definitely more like broadsword. Like you imagine his lightsaber is kind of like a giant Scottish sword. So it makes sense. Like their sword fighting styles are already, kind of similar. Rory and Ray Stevenson were actually good friends in real life, and
interesting.
Ray Stevenson's wife gave her personal blessing for Rory to play Balin.
Oh wow!
So
that's good news.
I think that played a lot. Of course, on top of his talent in general, but the fact that he is close to that family, I think, helped him get that role as well. Not like in a weird nepotism kind of way, but like it seems right for him to be the one, because that will help that family get closure, because it's someone close to them who's continuing his good friend's work. And so that makes me feel better about the casting. But I felt pretty darn good about it in the first place. I mean, like I said, I loved Rory in Game of Thrones, and the whole sex icon thing, I think, is from his role in Hot Fuzz, which he's a looker. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think he's gonna be great. So
one thing that's interesting, I do think that Liev Schreiber looks more like Ray Stevenson.
He does.
But as far as size of the man, Rory McCann is a massive human being. And so I think he fills the costume better. Now, one thing that, and this is me just spitballing, you guys have been listeners and fans of the show since day one, so you know that I'm just throwing Hail Marys as far as predictions go pretty much all the time. But one thing that makes me hopeful for is if his body size and his frame and all of that kind of stuff being more like Ray's was considered heavily in the casting, maybe that is telltale to let us know there's going to be a lot of action. You know what I mean? I mean, Liev Schreiber is a great action actor as well, but just having someone that they wanted to be able to zoom out and not have to worry about the size difference between Ray and the next actor. Hopefully we get a lot of physicality from him. So that would be awesome. And staying in the vein of news with Ahsoka, the other thing that was rumored / leaked this week, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a spoiler because who knows what role it's going to be. But Ewan McGregor supposedly reprising his role as Obi-Wan Kenobi for Ahsoka season 2. And
we have no idea what role it's going to be, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Still to be determined. Who knows who he's going to play in the show? But
yeah, and the fact that when that news came out, we also got news that the young lady that played the younger Ahsoka from the flashbacks, they were kind of leaked in tandem. What are y'all's thoughts on? I'm hopeful that we get Obi-Wan talking to her through the Force and stuff as well. But it seems to me like the natural thing, especially with, like I said, those castings kind of coming out hand in hand. It seems like we're going to get more Clone Wars era flashbacks with Anakin and Obi-Wan in their Clone Wars armor. Is that kind of the vibe you guys are getting as well?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I'm all for it.
Unreal.
Yeah, that armor is crazy. My big thing is I just hope that, because I'm all for shamelessly give me the Clone Wars, absolutely, in live action. But I just really hope that they've got like a reason, like a good reason to go back and show that, versus, oh, well, people went nuts when we showed them Anakin in last season. So we're going to crush these ratings by throwing that in there, but it doesn't really fit. Like I trust Filoni, but I just hope that they do that right, because it could start to feel kind of like a formula, and you don't want the show to feel so formulaic. So I've got that little bit of caution, but I mean, I'm not going to complain whatsoever to see Anakin and Obi-Wan in Clone Wars armor in a flashback with young Ahsoka. I think it's going to be great. So.
I really also hope if we do end up getting flashbacks, me personally, just selfishly, I hope we get a flashback where Ewan McGregor is wearing a mullet, like early Clone Wars.
Yes.
Because young Ahsoka, you remember it's from an earlier battle. Like Hayden's hair was kind of cut shorter, like what it would have been in early Clone Wars episodes. So I'm down with that. You got a thought?
I had a thought. I don't know why I wasn't really putting 2 and 2 together, but I bet you the flashback is going to be them on Mortis. Because Ahsoka was with them. It was the 2 of them. They were wearing their armor. Well, part of their armor. I think that was the era where it was just the gauntlets, clone gauntlet. But still, it could. That could be it. And
because she's on Peridia right now with supposedly, we saw the statue of, that Balin's walking along.
Yeah,
it's very interesting because you've got obviously Thrawn and Ezra make it back to the known galaxy, and then you've got Sabine and Ahsoka and Shin and Baylan all still on Peridia. And it makes me wonder, like, what is, Baylan releases Shin because she feels like she has this path she has to take. And he's like, well, that's the end of our relationship. Feel free to jump out of the nest. What, Joel, what do you think is Shin's, like, Baylan's clearly searching for something more, something deeper. We'll see. He's the one that's walking out on that statue at the end of season 1 that kind of gave us a peek into Mortis, potentially the ones being there, or there historically. What do you think Shin thinks that she's doing? And does Shin become who we assume will be Abeloth, or is Abeloth already there? We're getting kind of deep here in the lore, but what are your thoughts?
Let's just dive right in then. So I thought with the passing of Rey, I thought if they weren't going to do the recast route, I thought since Shin's path is not known to us yet, then they could just make Baylan's storyline hers. So she would kind of actually go after her master and pick up where he left off. Somehow write that in where he has to explain his path after she catches up to him. He passes away from something, and then she carries on that path, and then that's how we get to, because you can't just end that storyline. Like, that's obviously pretty major.
Right.
So, but now that they've recasted him, Rory can now take Baylan's storyline where it needs to go.
Right.
And I have, other than her taking on those Peridia bandits as her army and being some sort of warlord, I have no idea what she could be up to.
Yeah, it's very interesting because Baylan, I'll take any excuse or reason to go back and rewatch the whole series, but it's interesting to me that Baylan seems like the one that he's searching for something more. He's on some kind of what do you want to call it? He's on a quest. I'm trying to think of. I'm having a little bit of a brain fart here, but a pilgrimage. Thank you. He's on a pilgrimage of sorts to, like, one of the things that I'm looking forward to from Rory McCann is he had those moments where he as the Hound was traveling around with I think it's just with Arya, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Finn, is that correct? And so he's been like this butcher and like this warrior this whole time, kind of a shallow personality, to be completely honest, at the start. And then he's one-on-one with this young girl, and he's explained to her why, she doesn't want everything that, she thinks the world has to offer. It has something completely different to offer. And there's this depth there that I saw from Rey when Shin asked him things like, do you miss the Jedi? And he takes a moment and he thinks, and his answer is,
I miss the idea of it. But not the truth. The weakness.
I miss what they were supposed to be, or I miss what they were, or I miss the idea of it. That is such like a strong callback. It was a very strong moment. Like, as much as Ahsoka's a fan favorite, and as much as it was fun to see what Ezra looked like in live action, and as much as, obviously, especially me being the host of the Chiss Ascendancy podcast, finally seeing Thrawn in the flesh, the moments, like, I was on the edge of my seat when Thrawn came on screen, but the moments that I didn't want to look away and like I felt glued to the screen were these moments where I see Baylan answer a question and he's got 1,000 more things that he wants to say. And either it's not the right time or he sees Shin's path diverging from his own. And it's like, I'll give you the answer, but it's really pointless diving into how I really feel. So I wonder what he's looking for. What do y'all think, Finn? What do you think that Baylan is searching for on Peridia? He talks about, it calls to me. What is it? It calls to me. Is that the font of power? Is it Abeloth? Does she already exist? Or is that maybe they, to the chagrin of many watchers, Shin dies like super early on because Abeloth kills her. She's there for like 10 seconds and she dies to Abeloth. But what do you think? What is it that he's searching for? Like, obviously, we believe the call is something like the font of power, the pool of knowledge, or Abeloth herself. But is what he's looking for something else, or does he feel the call from her directly? Do you think?
I think it's kind of multifaceted. I think that the calling that he's hearing could potentially be Abeloth. I mean, we know that none of the other Mortis gods are around; they're all dead, unless they've found some weird roundabout way to be like, nope, actually they're not. They're back, which would feel a little weird. But I think that perhaps what it's calling to him could be Abeloth. But I think as far as what he's searching for, I think he's talking about like these cycles, like it goes over and over again and again and again, and we do this cycle of rebuilding and destruction and death, and then rebuilding and destruction and death. I think he's looking for a way to stop it, to stop all of it. And whether he is aware of it or not, I think that method to stop it is the world between worlds.
Yeah.
And he thinks that Peridia is like a nexus, or even like a direct gateway into like a portal, kind of like on Lothal. Like maybe there's a portal to the world between worlds on Peridia,
right,
or Mortis, or whatever you want to call it. Because I do think Mortis is part of Peridia as well. I just think that all of it lines up too well to not hold some sort of merit. Because it would make sense. I mean, Ezra was able to go through the world between worlds and alter Ahsoka's fate, perhaps based on limited information that Baylan has. Perhaps he thinks that the world between worlds will allow him to go back and prevent wars or things like that from happening, destruction, the death of the Jedi. Because he seems a little too sentimental about the Jedi as well. Like, I think he misses it and feels like if he could go back and change it, it could be something more, like what he calls Shin, like, but I trained you to be something more. But he never really he never really describes what he believes the more is. So I don't know. I think he I don't think it's going to be like time travel gimmicky, but I think that he feels he has a chance to change the past.
Yeah.
And ultimately
it's interesting
the future.
Because the Abeloth box, if you open that box, it's, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. And that's what they found out, in the Fate of the Jedi series, which in Legends takes place, 35, 40 years after episode 6. This is closer to like maybe 5 or 7 years later, somewhere in that ballpark. What's interesting is the character actually that he reminds me of from Legends, and this is just me being the Chiss Ascendancy podcast, but the character that Balin reminds me the most of, someone who is so reminiscent and looking back and like, I wish things could be different. Things were supposed to be a certain type of way and they weren't. And it ends up really twisting him and all that kind of stuff is Darth Krayt. That's who he reminds me the most of, which interestingly enough, this is kind of getting off the beaten path. And do I think they're going to go this way? No. But in the Fate of the Jedi series, the way that they defeat Abeloth is very, very hard to explain, very hard to picture. If you guys have read those novels or read wikis on them or whatever, they're in a more spiritual plane. Like, Joel, I think you've read those books.
I've listened to the audiobooks, and
right.
That was a grind.
Yes, it was. You remember how it was like because when you're listening to an audiobook, it's going faster than you would naturally read it. So when you're actually reading on the page, you can pause and put your finger down on the page and go, what the hell's going on? But when you're listening to an audiobook, Mark Thompson doesn't know that you don't know what's happening. And so he's still going. And it's really crazy because it's Luke and this man that's like the shadow, they called him the shadow or whatever. It ends up being Darth Krayt is who they're describing. And which is crazy because Darth Krayt's like in a different part of the galaxy and he lives for like hundreds of years, whatever. But Luke and Darth Krayt end up working together to defeat Abeloth, and it's in a spiritual plane. Like it's not on the, the mortal ground anywhere. It's very freaking weird. And so I don't think that they're going to go that direction. But it's kind of a weird thing. Like ironically, they went 30 years in the future. So they had more of a clean slate for the sequels. And now the sequels being 30 years in the future are kind of screwing up the rest of the plans for what they're doing now. Cause I'm like, so if you could defeat Abeloth and Thrawn in the span of 30 years, you can't beat the First Order. Like, what are we talking about? You know what I mean?
Well,
they're setting up.
The galaxy takes such a beating from Thrawn and Abeloth that there's almost kind of like a reset as far as.
Yeah, they're even more vulnerable.
Yeah.
What if Abeloth is a threat that only Ahsoka and Sabine and Shin and Balin are dealing with? Like, what if that's all happening on Peridia and it gets settled on Peridia? And she never even has a chance to get out into the wider galaxy.
I think that would make more sense for what they would need to do. But I personally, as someone who's read those books and was like, there's no way they're beating this character. Like, I don't know if you felt that way, Joel, whenever you're listening to him. Yeah. Abeloth would do something and I'd be like, I don't know how we're going to survive. I know we got 9 books to figure it out, but I feel like the galaxy is just going to explode. There's no way that they're going to beat this character.
I think that's how Ahsoka's going to meet her end, is taking out Abeloth. Yeah. That'll be Ahsoka's big heroic ending.
And then she will turn into the daughter.
Yeah.
Wrap that up.
And Anakin will assume his spot as the father. And I think Balin could potentially be the son.
Or if Balin is to be like a Darth Krayt type character, I would actually really like if he turns into Darth Krayt at the end. And then in the New Jedi Order with Rey, that he's the big bad of that trilogy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I like that. And that would help fall a little bit more into line with the Legends timeline. I know they're trying not to stay too close to that, but
he can
you
come
need
out
a
of the
character.
woodwork. He
Right.
can come out of the woodwork because the Emperor is finally defeated, and he can now go for ruling the galaxy now that the Emperor is out of the way.
Yeah, because similar, because I know, Joel, one of the things that we really have in common is you're a huge fan of the comics. So you always make me jealous with the epic collections that you get in the mail. And the Legacy series is one of the shining stars of that really impressive run from Dark Horse. And it's interesting because Darth Krayt, like you said, he's one of my favorite characters because he is a Tusken Raider by birth, and then he survives Order 66, and then he's defeated. And long story short, he ends up captured by the Yuuzhan Vong, and that's where that crazy armor comes from. It's like a torture device that he basically just kind of embraces. And so, yeah, they're not ever going to introduce the Yuuzhan Vong into canon, I don't believe. And so there would have to be something really wild. Yeah, the Yuuzhan Vong are a strange part of the lore from Legends. It's really, and George was interesting because George didn't really care for the concept of creatures or species being completely making the Force a moot point. Like, he didn't like the Islamiri from Heir to the Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't care for that because it's in all things. It surrounds us. It binds us together. You can't make a bubble where the Force doesn't work, which is why I say it's interesting, is because one of the arcs, and I should do an episode about this now that I'm thinking about it, but one of the canceled arcs of Clone Wars that they were considering was introducing the Yuuzhan Vong.
Yeah. Which, how in the world were they going to squeeze? Let me just squeeze the Yuuzhan Vong into the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And
how does that
resolve
work?
that real quick.
Right. So it's funny that he doesn't like the Islamiri, but then you have a whole race of people who everything they own is organic because mechanics and electricity and anything non-organic is basically an abomination, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing. I don't think they'll ever bring those into canon. It's just too much. I think the people that are working at Disney, I think people like Dave Filoni, who's kind of the head honcho right now, I think he doesn't want to tackle something like that. It's the most Star Wars got away from what Star Wars originally feels like for me personally. They were a great adversary in the New Jedi Order series, but it's the most I've been like, what do you mean Luke Skywalker can't use the Force? Like, what's the whole, he has a connection to the Force. Like, it's a part of his soul at this point. You know what I mean? It would be like if you were religious and then there was a certain people from a certain country in the world that when you were in their presence, the spirit of God just didn't exist. That would make no sense as someone who comes from a faith background. It doesn't work that way. And George was very, very passionate about the fact that the Force kind of embodied that same it's an energy field, but it's, man, we're getting deep in the weeds here. But long story short, it's just weird that the Yuuzhan Vong would be a thing. I'm actually, super side note, I know I'm getting way off track, but the book I'm reading right now, I'm actually in a couple of different books per usual, but the book that I'm reading right now, let me open up my iPad real quick. I'm reading a book called Riptide by Paul S. Kemp. Let's see.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. It's part two of a duology. The first one was Cross Current, and apparently,
they're surfers.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it is funny that it's all like surfing lingo. Apparently, the end of this book leaves room for a part 3, and then the Disney merger happened and it never came about. So I'm interested to see how it ends. But basically, the main character is Jaden Core. and he's the character that you're building up in Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, from way back in the day. Kyle Katarn's apprentice. But there's a couple of Umbarans who they create almost like an Islamiri. Like if you and I are Force users, especially in Legends, there was like an aura about us that, there's an aura about us that when someone like Jason Solo, when he was Darth Kaitis, he would basically like almost put on his Force aura would be put on Do Not Disturb, and then he would just like go missing from the map, and it would feel not like a death, but like a weird missingness. And the two Umbarans, their brother and sister in this book, they have that effect. So you got these cloned Force sensitives. It's a weird book. But when these guys walk down the hallway to try to assassinate these characters, the clones are like looking over their shoulder, like they feel strange because they've never not felt the Force before. That's where that came from my head, from the Yuuzhan Vong and all that. But yeah, I think that we have a lot to look forward to in Ahsoka season 2, and I'm hearing supposedly it's being written as if this is the last season of it. Like it's going to have a satisfying end of season 2. Do y'all think that's accurate, or are they? Is it satisfying so that they can have a movie? You know what I mean?
I mean, it makes sense because I mean, it likely won't be the end of Ahsoka's story yet, because I figured that whatever end they bring to Ahsoka will have to happen in Dave Filoni's big crossover movie that's supposed to be the culmination of the entire Mandoverse, like the end of it all. Yeah. So I figured that Ahsoka will at least make it that far.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because I mean, the crossover movie was supposed to happen in 2026, but I imagine it got pushed back a little bit because of the strikes, and then they're doing another Mando movie, so they've probably pushed it back even further. Yeah. So there's not really a whole lot of time for them to do more than just one more season.
Right. And that's actually kind of a good segue, because we got this and one more piece of news, and we'll jump into Skeleton Crew. But
spoiler alert before this one, though.
A little bit of a spoiler alert. In my opinion, not that big of a spoiler, because eventually you're going to find out who the bad guy is. But and who knows? This may be true. This may not be true. For instance, those of you who are listening to this that know about or collect Star Wars collectibles, Yak Face, who is pretty big in the community, he does a lot of leaks and information and all that kind of stuff. Supposedly, he confirmed this character. So apparently, spoiler alert, if you don't want to know about this, if you're listening to this podcast, you want to know. But essentially, Embo from the Clone Wars is going to be the big bad for the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. And there are a couple of feelings towards this. People who are fans of the Clone Wars, who like Embo, people like us are like, oh, that's cool. But there is a growing sentiment. This is just what I've heard, so don't shoot me. But what I've heard is there's growing, what's the word? There's growing angst amongst those working on the movie that it might not be received as well as they're hoping. And that's a two-part reason. Part one is because it's not really a movie that they wrote to be a movie from scratch. It's a scrapped Mandalorian season 4 that instead of doing a season of 6 or 8 or 10 episodes, it's just making a movie. And so you have these smaller in-universe things that would make sense as a TV show, but maybe not grand enough for the silver screen. And so that's one thing. And the other thing is people are just worried that it's going to be hard to connect to the villain because doesn't speak basic, doesn't speak English. So it's going to be very strange if the main guy, so they either break the canon and he does speak basic, or he doesn't. And the main bad guy, that's, I assume, going to be on screen a decent chunk of the movie, doesn't talk or has subtitles the whole time.
It's going to be Ewoks Battle for Endor all over again, where Wicket suddenly speaks English, and you're like, I'm sorry.
That's
you
awesome.
said yup nub. Like,
when you're talking about Embo, like nobody understanding what he says, I was thinking about his dialogue from the Clone Wars, and I'm like, oh, so he's gonna sound like Tom Hardy as Bane in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
Maybe so.
You gotta put subtitles on anyway.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Right.
I've
had a clog in this mask all these years.
Yeah.
Which one of these things do you smell out of?
Yeah. The college humor one.
Yeah, and you know what's
Cry.
what's interesting is what's one of the interesting things is if he's the bad guy, it just kind of, I don't know, I'm going to see the movie like 12 times in theaters regardless, right? We all are. But for the average viewer, is it a strong enough story to say Star Wars is back, guys? I went and saw the new Star Wars movie and it's fantastic.
I mean, I guess it all comes down to the execution of it, but my worry is that the kind of synopsis that's floating around, again, spoiler warning, but you're this far, but is that Jeremy Allen White's Rada the Hutt is going to be kidnapped again, and Mando is going to go find him, and Embo is working for the other guy and is trying to keep him from doing it, which seems pretty low stakes,
right,
like adventure for a big screen movie. But also, we've already done this. Like, this is the Clone Wars movie all over again.
Yeah, the worst movie, the worst Star Wars movie ever received ever from 2008 was the Clone Wars movie, and we decided to rehash that story as our first movie on screen since The Rise of Skywalker, which had a 50-50 split of people who didn't and did like it.
I don't know. It's like one, how much older is Rada the Hutt at this point? Like, do they age the same, or is this just like teenage Rada the Hutt, and he's just like, all right.
I've always heard that Hutts are long lived, so I would imagine he's not that much
older.
Yeah,
and
so,
like,
and
how many times are we gonna kidnap this kid? Like, and who cares at this point? His dad's dead. Who's gonna pay the ransom for this kid? What do they want?
Also, it's like it's weird because the Mandalorian's whole first season was based around the Mandalorian as a bounty hunter trying to protect Grogu, who was a prized infant from other bounty hunters and the resurgent Empire. And now we're taking that same concept and making a movie out of it, except for the target isn't a super lovable baby Yoda that we found out was named Grogu that pukes green. It's a Hutt. Everybody hates Hutts. Nobody has ever gone, oh, wow, that's a cute Hutt.
But you know what I mean? You know what they really are trying to do? They just wanted to do 2 babies, 1 pram. That's what they want to do. They wanted to do 2 alien babies, 1 pram, and then sell a bunch of toys.
Yeah.
Get your Rada the Hutt stuffy. Like, good Lord.
Yeah, it's crazy
the more
because
we talk about it, I just don't believe it.
Yeah, I really hope it's a false thread.
I think I
don't mind
throwing stuff out there to mislead everyone.
It's Plo Koon all over again.
Which will be fine with me. Which will be totally fine with me. The other thing, to your point, Joel, right? And then we'll move on to, we have one more piece of news. To your point is in the Aftermath trilogy, which turns 10 years old this year, if you can believe that. We've known Cobb Vanth for 10 years. Yeah. Is that crazy or what?
Wow.
That's wild.
One of the cutaways, Chuck Wendig did an amazing job of putting these extra, you had the main story, which was really fun. I really loved that crew. And then you have the in-betweens that kind of check on your characters that you remember from the original trilogy. So you had like a Lando episode, you had the Cobb Vanth episode, you had the Jawas finding Boba Fett's armor and things like that. And one of the stories that was told was Embo and Dengar working together, but they were, I can't recall exactly what they were doing, but they were basically good guys is the point I'm trying to make. Like they were heroic type characters who were helping people. They weren't stealing people. They weren't kidnapping anyone. It's just so weird. You have Boba Fett, who's like never cared about another soul in his life, and now he like wants to clean up the streets so that the orphans have clean trash cans to eat out of on Mos Espa. And then you have Imbo, who's just a hired bounty hunter who the last time we heard from him was doing good things, and now he's the big bad of a new show. I hope that I'm wrong. I want to see Imbo. If Imbo's on the screen, that's fine. But I don't see him as a main villain for the first time Star Wars has been in theaters in what will end up being, if that movie comes out, we think 26. Is that correct?
Yeah, December 26th.
So the first movie in 7 years?
Since 2018.
18 or 19? Yeah.
19.
Oh, 19.
19.
Right. Yeah.
7 years.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like the Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005 and The Force Awakens came out in 2015. Right? So that's 10 years. This is almost as long of time from Revenge of the Sith to The Force Awakens, and the first movie we're going to see on screen is Rod of the Hutt Gets Kidnapped Part 2, Baby's Day Out.
Baby's Day Out.
Like, I really hope that's not the case. You know?
Oh, no.
But here's another part that we know for sure is actual news, not just hearsay. The project that I personally am most excited for when it comes to movies and such with Star Wars is the Dawn of the Jedi movie coming out from director James Mangold, who directed Logan, amongst other things. And there's a book out there called Dawn of the Jedi from Legends that talks about the first Jedi, and the Jedi spelled all different and all kinds of stuff. When I was younger, there was a girl on the cover, and I was like, I'm not going to read this. There's a girl on the cover. Okay, but here's an actual quote. Okay, so this is from the Hollywood Outsider, but it's been reported from several places, and I actually made a video about this earlier this week. The original report comes from Variety. Okay, so it's an actual magazine. It says, according to a recent Variety report, James Mangold's upcoming Star Wars movie is set 25,000 years before The Phantom Menace because the director, quote, doesn't want to deal with the constant fan expectations of perfection. He says, I'm not that interested in being handcuffed by so much lore at this point that it's almost immovable and you can't please anybody.
Yeah. Blame him.
I don't blame his sentiment, but I also don't like that at all. It's interesting to me that if you go back so obviously in canon, you could go back 300 years and you're outside of the High Republic, right? Going back 25,000 years is interesting, but in Legends, it's like you're smack dab in the middle of several stories. Yeah. It's not like 25,000 years is significant enough that you're not going to have stories from back then.
Yeah, now, if he doesn't include the Rakatan Empire, I'm going to be upset.
Correct. Yeah. That's exactly how I feel.
Especially after it was name dropped in Andor.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
teased us.
The cool freaking those triangular obelisk Zinfo ships, there's 9 of them in the galaxy, and then they just randomly go up from the planet they're going, and there's like so much, for those of us who have read the books and the comics, there's so much heavy lore of like, hey, I know you want to do your own thing, and I would want to do my own thing too, but can we just get a small little something from you? Because the pin you dropped is right in the middle of this story that I remember really enjoying.
You know what I think he's doing? I think he's just trying to set the bar low. He's trying not to get everyone's expectations up. He's getting us already mentally prepared for like, don't expect anything. And then that way, if he does include some of the things that already exist in the lore, then we'll be like, oh my god, he did it, he did the thing, and then we'll be excited. But if we go in thinking that we're going to see all of this stuff that should be there based on Legends, we'll walk away disappointed. He's going ahead and setting the bar low.
It is alarming though that he's not even like, that quote kind of makes it sound like he's oblivious to any content from that era.
Right.
So for me, it's like the 3 things I want to see most from that era are the Rakatans, the like all the Jedi need to be using the lightsabers with the cord to the power pack on their belt.
Oh, the proto gamers
and flying Rancors.
Yes.
Flying Rancors.
Those are my top 3 ones. from
Yeah.
Dawn of the
and
Jedi.
you gotta think the story group, like, they're all big nerds, just like all of us. I feel like they'll be like, all right, dude, you gotta put one of these in here.
Yeah.
Yeah. It makes
We've
me
already
wonder
name dropped the
too.
Rakatans, so why don't you go ahead and just.
Yeah. It makes me
Also,
wonder
I gotta
too, like
see my boy.
Hu Yang.
I gotta see my
Yeah.
boy, sweet baby boy Hu Yang, born in this
Yeah.
movie.
What if he's a smaller version of himself? Like the droids grow.
He was just a little circuit. Look at him. But yeah, I do
It
want to
makes
see
me
Hu Yang.
wonder if you know, I wonder often, and I'm not in those meetings, do you think that they consult authors from like Legends material and stuff like that? Like, do you think, for instance, like Filoni supposedly has been working hand in hand with Zahn when it comes to writing and things like that for Thrawn?
Is he actually?
That's what I've heard.
Because I
But
thought Zahn was on video talking to someone at a convention, and they asked him that question. I thought he said, no, they haven't talked to me at all.
Oh,
But
really?
maybe this is a couple years ago.
Huh.
You could be right. I thought he had been speaking with him.
Oh.
I wonder. Because yeah, that's my whole thing with Thrawn is that they asked Zahn to come back and write canon material for him, and then in Rebels he wasn't like how he was in the canon material that Zahn wrote for him. And then they brought him back, but then they also asked Zahn to write 3 more novels, which is how we got the Ascendancy trilogy. And it makes me curious, like, what was the point of having 6 new Thrawn novels if the character that we're going to portray in front of the world on screen is more like his heir to the Empire character? Like, why set up the Grisks and, more importantly, set up the Chiss Ascendancy if his number one goal, like by the end of the Ascendancy trilogy, he goes into public quote unquote exile for the sake of actually leaving on this secret mission that he and his cohorts have put together to try to infiltrate the Empire so that he can gain favor with the Emperor, so that he can bring back warriors just in case the Grisks do attack the Ascendancy. And that's where we left the Ascendancy trilogy, and we see him rise through the ranks, and we see him in Rebels, and then he gets stuck on Peridia, and then he's gonna go back. I guess my question is, what is Thrawn even gonna try to do in Ahsoka season 2 if the main character and the most popular character from the first season, which would be Ahsoka and Baylan, they're both on Peridia? So are we not going to see very much Thrawn in season 2, do you think?
I think we will. I think we're going to start seeing him launching his attacks on the New Republic, because Filoni did talk about it in an interview how he's purposely poised Thrawn and Hera to have like a big rematch. Like they've been up against each other before. They respect each other's like skill and talent as like tacticians and leaders, but I think he described them as 2 juggernauts on either side, that he was like they've got to go against each other again. So I have a feeling that, if correct me if I'm wrong, because again I'm not as learned in the legend ways. In the Heir to the Empire trilogy, Akbar was at the time the leader of the New Republic Navy, right?
Yeah, pretty
Like he
much.
was the lead admiral. I
Yeah.
think that Hera is going to kind of, for the purpose of the Mandoverse, assume more of that role and kind of lead the New Republic forces against Thrawn. I think that's what he's kind of setting up there. So I feel like Ahsoka season 2, Thrawn's going to be over here, and we're going to start seeing him wreak havoc with some of our other heroes, like the Ghost Crew. And then Ahsoka, Baylan Shin, and Sabine are all going to have their own little thing going on over here, and it'll turn into probably the whole Thrawn and then Abeloth, and it's gonna be absolute chaos, and we can't decide as an audience which threat is worse, which one is more worrisome, which one's stressing me out more, and it hopefully it'll set up the perfect amount of tension for the story,
right,
to raise the stakes.
One thing, and this is, I will say this with all due respect, Dave Filoni. The only issue I have with Dave Filoni is that he thinks too highly of his own characters.
I can see that.
Dave Filoni will find a reason to put Ahsoka in a story. He'll find a reason to, and what I mean by that is, by the end of the Thrawn canon trilogy, the Emperor is trying to be on Thrawn's good side because he sees Thrawn as a bridge to expanding the Empire and take over the Chiss Ascendancy. At the same time, Thrawn says things to Vader. Vader asks him, "Have you thought of a way to kill me?" And he's like, "Yeah, I've thought of like 6." Right? The Emperor is trying to manipulate Thrawn so he can gain control of the Ascendancy. Thrawn is trying to get on the Emperor's good side so that he can use the Emperor to the Chiss Ascendancy's benefit. I just am, in my all due respect, I do not think that Hera Syndulla is even on the same, like, if this was a chess tournament, she would not even be in his bracket of players when it comes to tacticians. She's a better, probably, pilot, but there's no way, there's no freaking way that she is on his level as a tactician. Like, he's a grand admiral.
Even all the books, like the stuff that he lays out, and like you got all like the Eli Vanto, like, oh, I don't know what he's doing. Why would he do that? And then there's this grand reveal of Thrawn's mastermind, and he's just like, oh, okay, like, and that just keeps happening throughout all the books. He keeps dumbfounding everyone.
And it's interesting to me because Timothy Zahn, now obviously same thing for Zahn. Zahn thinks that Thrawn's the best thing since sliced bread. I happen to agree with Zahn. But he said there is not a mind in the Star Wars universe that can defeat Thrawn in a tactical situation, barring the fact that there's an unseen influence from the outside. So in Rebels, the Bendu had to happen. The Purrgil had to happen. Things like that.
Had to betray them.
Yeah. In the Legends material, Rook had to betray Thrawn for Thrawn to be defeated. Thrawn had the whole freaking Denogri turning on him because of Leia, was a turning point that he didn't foresee. And in Rebels, if you think back to those storylines, he had the entire crew dead to rights, and one of the Imperial guys broke the blockade because he wasn't going to miss his chance for glory. And there was never a chance, there was never a time where, when Thrawn was at the helm, that it was a straight up chess match that he lost. Somebody had to come across and slant and hit the board off the table for Thrawn to lose. And so I'm worried about two things for Thrawn. I'm worried that he's not going to get a justifying end. That really worries me, because his whole goal is to defend the Ascendancy. His goal is not Imperial rule like it was in Legends. And I'm also worried that he's not going to get a satisfying end, and also that we're never going to get to really see his prowess like we've gotten to read all of these years, like in Legends and canon. Now you have the Hand of Thrawn duology, which doesn't really work with Thrawn. So you have the Heir to the Empire trilogy, and you have 2 trilogies in the canon. So you have 9 books, all dedicated to how brilliant this guy is. And every time that we see him on screen for the larger audience, he gets poo-pooed on, and it's frustrating. Zahn said one time when the sequel trilogy was coming out, that Kylo Ren is lucky that Thrawn doesn't exist in this galaxy, because he would have Kylo Ren for breakfast. He's like, "Oh, you see that you're emotional over X, Y, and Z? Let me put this in front of you so you blow your gaskets." Timothy Zahn said that if Thrawn was in charge of the fleet over Endor, the rebellion never could have overthrown the Empire. Like, that's the kind of mind that we're talking about. And I don't think that we've gotten a good enough version of it yet. I'm hoping that we get something better in season 2. I would even be okay with Thrawn joining forces with the New Republic and explaining to Luke Skywalker, "Hey, here is my number one cause, is to protect my people, the same way you want to protect the galaxy," and whatever. But I don't think we'll get that, unfortunately. So let's jump in. Changing gears. Let's jump into the Skeleton Crew. We don't have to go at it for a super long time, but what were y'all's thoughts now that this hopefully, like we said, what we believe hopefully is season 1 is done? How did y'all feel when the credits rolled yesterday or earlier today for you, Joel? When those credits rolled, what were your feelings? Did you feel satisfied? Were you excited? What did you think?
Dude,
Loved it.
It was absolutely thrilling the whole time. I would describe the entire season, beginning to end, whimsical, fun, and an absolute thrill ride. It was great. I loved it.
It might actually be the first time that the producers and directors have described a Star Wars project, and at the end of it, they were dead on with their description. It was exactly like the Amblin films from the 90s and the 80s. It was exactly that. Like, there's so many things I'm like, man, this could have come out when I was a kid and no difference. And it was like the same feel. It was like the same, like, for a kids movie, it's like that kind of like some of the kids movies in the 80s and 90s, there's some creepy stuff in there.
Right.
And
yeah.
And this had it. Like, it had like the scary pirates, and it had like kind of real risk and threat to it. And even when they first went to the pirate station, there's like kind of like a mock-up red light district. There's pirates puking on the ground. There's real adult, like, as a parent, I'm watching with my kid, I'm like, oh, like, and then my one son, there's like the red light district, and then he's like, what's in there? What's that? I'm like, never mind.
You're doing math. You wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
That's funny. It's funny whenever I'm eating, if I'm ever eating food and I don't want my kids to eat it, I'll be like, it's spicy. You wouldn't like it. It's real spicy.
Yeah,
that's kind of how. Yeah, that scene. It's like you got these kids. They've never been off at Atten before, and their first place that they're not on that Atten is a freaking pirate hangout, which is like the most debauchery filled place in the galaxy. And they're
like, to a bar and a brothel.
Yeah, it's like, I got these gold coins. Anybody want these gold coins? And they're surrounded by freaking
whims over
murderers.
Here. Now, do I pay with these? But
exactly. So,
Dataries.
What would you say coming up with the finale? They finally, obviously, kind of describe to the audience, if you haven't watched it yet, they're trying to get back to their home planet. They finally get back there, but it's not unscathed. And we have Jude Law's character, who has about 6 different names throughout the season, in typical pirate fashion.
I have them all written down.
You have a list of them?
I have a list. Okay. He is the Mad Captain Silvo, Jod Nanawood, Crimson Jack, Dash Zenton, Jodwick Zank, or the Republic Emissary.
Yeah. I mean, he was really throwing that emissary title around. He was like, "Get me a triple meat, triple cheese from Whataburger. I'm the emissary."
Yeah.
I'm the emissary.
I love that. And then it had real heart to it, because I don't think he actually would have killed anyone with the lightsaber. I don't think this. Then you can see when, like, things kind of like calm down he's threatened them enough so that they back off. And then you could see he turns his back to the group and he's just like, I don't want to ruin this planet. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to. I don't want to be like this. But he's still this little desperate child trying to climb out of the gutter.
Right.
And he's just been so driven by that his whole life. Assuming he's like 50 or whatever, then, or maybe 40 or 50, and then he's just like, that's his whole life. He watched like the one person that had faith in him and saw potential in him get killed and slaughtered by inquisitors right in front of him. So he's had no one.
Right.
Yeah.
And but there's still good in him. I like that he's still alive, and that smirk he gives when he sees the pirate ship go down. He's already thought of a way out. He's already thought of something. And I can't wait to find out what it is.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. Him, that's for sure.
Yeah. I was going to ask both of you guys, what do you think? Okay, so hypothetically, they renew for season 2, or let's say that there's a show down the road where he pops back up in some respect. What is next for Jod? Do you think that he just keeps doing piratey things, or do you think that he's kind of learned his lesson, that there's a better way, or what do you think? Because they did a really good job of painting him just like cold black heart at the end of episode 7, but the end of the finale, again, it's a means to an end. I don't want to hurt anybody, but I also don't trust anybody. So if I can steal all the gold from your planet to make it better for myself, then so be it. It's interesting though, because he was ready to enslave the whole planet at one point, honestly, before the X-Wing showed up.
They turned him into a real rat bastard. Like he, I love that they really doubled down on like, oh, we're not doing this redemption arc thing. Like this guy that you've been hanging out with this whole time is actually the villain of the show. Like he just guns down Brutus in cold blood. That was awesome. Like threatens these kids, takes over everything. I mean, like he really just fit the villainous role, which makes sense because Jude Law said that the character was contradictory. Like right when you're starting to kind of like him and you think that maybe he's warming up to these kids. Nope. Let me hold a knife up to this kid's throat, threaten her, take this shit from them.
Yeah.
Threaten to throw them in prison or cut them up or kill their families, like things like that. Like, I love that he became the villain, and I have a feeling either he has gotten away and is just off doing Jod hustles, or maybe he started up with a new crew somewhere, because pirating is like all he knows, or he's been captured and he's like gotten to the acceptance stage of, all right, you won fair and square.
Yeah.
And because he's not without, he has a little bit of honor, a little bit, enough to not actually hurt anybody, like any of these kids. And he seemed genuinely upset when they all thought that KB died, because he was just like, it didn't have to be this way. Like we didn't have to do this. Even like so much as like telling them stupid, like that's not even going to do anything because the barrier's still up, and like basically helping them solve the problem. Like she can't get a message out because the barrier's still up. Like I think that there's the potential that he could be like arrested and he's in prison somewhere, but something might happen in the future, like further along the story, and we're going to need some sort of scoundrel. We're going to need the help.
He could be. You make a really good point, Finn. I think that he could end up being, like a
talent card,
or like a rogue turned Jedi. He has the Force, and he just has a very like low level understanding of it. But in Legends, it wasn't uncommon for someone like, I think if I'm not mistaken, Kyle Katarn was like a stormtrooper and all that stuff. And then he gets out. This is post Return of the Jedi, and he's already an adult, and he ends up being one of the greatest Jedi in the Order. Too old to begin the training didn't really exist at that time. Or it did exist in the prequels, but Luke was charting a new path. It's that old sequel trilogy getting in the way of, if he becomes a real Jedi, then does he also die, or I guess he does his own thing. But maybe he could be someone that I could see, like, you think that Han Solo's the ultimate like schmoozer slash like trickster, and then Han Solo walks into a cargo hold thinking he just stole it and it's gone, and you look down the hallway and Jod's running away. Like, he could be that kind of a character. Um, I was hoping when he got to the supervisor and it was this giant droid brain with one big eye, I was hoping that that it would be not a full circle but a semicircle, and it would turn around and Jackson would be the supervisor. And it was a Leppy this whole time. How freaking amazing would that be?
That would have been insane.
And I would have got away with it for one of these meddling kids.
No.
I'm actually,
but like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like he could totally do it. Wouldn't it be awesome to see like Ezra or Luke catch wind of like, there's a Jedi in prison, like this guy's a Force user and he's in prison. Well, I gotta meet him. I gotta come talk to this guy.
Yeah.
See what he's about. I would love to see an exchange, and then of course I would love to see an exchange between Luke and Ezra, but that's a completely other thing. But yeah, I think that like there's been reports kind of going on the news thing. There's been reports that characters from Skeleton Crew are confirmed to be involved in the Dave Filoni like crossover movie. So it makes me think, are they going to just like, quick kids, we need the 4 of you to come do, like, no, probably not. But Jod, I bet they could use Jod.
Yeah, Jod could be, he gives a really he could be the Star Lord of the Star Wars world. That's kind of the vibe he gives.
Kinda.
What were you going to say, Joel? You had something a second ago.
Yeah, I was actually shocked that the supervisor or whatever ended up just being a big robot and not a person.
Yeah.
I thought for sure that was going to be Tack Rented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the only real loose thread that I got through this whole thing, was they went to all the trouble of not showing us Tack Renned's face in the hologram and everything, but then they didn't really do.
There's no big reveal of the supervisor, and I thought it was going to be like a Wizard of Oz thing, like you said, like a semicircle. Then it was going to turn around after he stabbed it with the lightsaber. Then like some human would come out, and he's like, "Why'd you do that?" And
all the big cables and like tubes that were in the or I thought they might have been tubes that were like hanging from the ceiling inside the tower. I thought, oh my gosh, this is about to be one hell of a life support system, and this dude's just been plugged up to artificial life for like centuries, and it's gonna be rented. Nope.
Yeah, it gave me very strong. I looked over at Macy and I said, why are they trying to make this look like Exegol? Like with all the tubes and everything, and then it ended up just being a droid, which, like, it's not technically a unanswered question because it ended up just being a droid. But I thought that there would be, I guess my question is, like, they have the great work that they're doing, and the parents said, like, you'll understand it someday. So maybe they're holding a few cards still to their chest of, like, what all that money's there for or whatever. Like, if you're an adult, like, we're all freaking adults, and I was going to work, and I was like, so we're making all this money, but we haven't had somebody come and deliver gold to make it from, or anybody pick up this money for, like, 50 years. So we do know that the most recent time that they gained any information from the Republic would have been at the end of the Clone Wars, because he said that all Jedi were traitors. That was the last transmission that they received. So they've been just printing money for like 30 years.
Yeah, but man, the supervisor was cold, man. When he was like, "Oh yeah, well, we got a transition and say that all the Jedi were traitors." So which one are you lying about? Being a Jedi or being? I was like, "Dang, he clocked him. Oh, he's so good." And then he stabbed him. I was like, "Dang, I like that guy."
Yeah,
really
Jod did.
They warm up to the supervisor.
Jod didn't even give him a chance to question him. Yeah, it was weird that it was like, I wonder what it's so weird that they have like a whole manifesto about the great work and stuff like that, very cult like. But I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, 30 years, if they set up the barrier and didn't talk to anybody post the Clone Wars, there's 20 years roughly between 3 and 4. And then there's another like 3 years, I guess, between 4 and 5, and another year between 5 and 6. So you're looking at 25 years and then another like 7. So it's been 30, 35 years, somewhere in that ballpark from the time they set up the barrier. It's just so strange to me that there's this whole great work and there's this whole manifesto, and they have this like really strong belief in their way of life, and everybody has to take the assessment. But it's only been established for like 30 years. Like Wim's dad was in his 40s, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
yeah, he looked
how old were
middle-aged,
you?
but
yeah,
he would have been born, because they said that Aden was functioning for generations.
Yeah.
I feel like it's been a secret for a long time. It's just, even though it's been a secret to the rest of the galaxy, there's probably like, kind of like you guys like Harry Potter, right? You've read the books.
Harry Potter. But...
Oh, yeah, well, it's this really cool book. You should read it sometime. Little small story. Hopefully it picks up one day. But in the beginning of Half-Blood Prince, there's that whole chapter where it's just, there's the new Muggle Prime Minister, and he's just having these meetings with the Minister of Magic, and they're not worried about like, oh, you just told this Muggle, and he's like, because they're like, who are you gonna tell? Who's gonna believe you? Like, who's gonna? Aden, like we're in contact with Aden. Sure,
right.
Sure you are. Just like everyone didn't believe the kids. Like, I have a feeling it might be like the Chancellor of the Republic gets to be in contact with Aden, and that's it.
And so does the Mint creates currency for the Republic, and emissaries pick it up?
That's what it sounds like.
Because Aten mines the materials and mints the credits.
That's what
they just fund the Republic.
Yeah,
pretty much.
It's Fort Knox, essentially.
They still have 1,139 vaults, all filled to the brim with dataries.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's so interesting to me that like, what is the great work? Making the money? Like, I don't know. It feels like there could be more told.
Yeah, it's probably just a line that they feed everyone so that, they buy into this big group effort, like to keep the peace and work together at this great work together.
Yeah, it's funny because once the barrier is passed through, their actual size of Aten reminds me of King Kai's planet from Dragon Ball Z, where like there's a house and you can like run in a straight line for like 30 seconds and come to the other side of the world. Like
it was like really small inside.
Really small. So it's just interesting. I guess you make a really good point that the people, just because they haven't received any word from outside in 30 years, doesn't mean that the people living there haven't been. Maybe the supervisor and like his head council of like 1 or 2 other people have contact with the outside world, but everybody else has just been living the same Truman Show style life for the last however many hundreds of years. Yeah. So I guess that makes more sense there, because I guess that makes sense because
since the Old Republic.
Yeah, because the parents are terrified of anything outside the barrier.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they all grew up in some kind of a shelter.
I'm also wondering if the supervisor is now a droid, but with the, I guess, personality or whatever uploaded into it. Someone that passed, like maybe Tak Rened was the supervisor generations earlier, and then uploaded everything up to this massive droid to keep things running.
Yeah, it reminds me of that movie Transcendence, where Johnny
Yes.
Depp is like sickly and his personality is the first DNA to be uploaded so that the computers take on his personality.
Yeah.
Something like that. That'd be very interesting. It's not terribly indifferent to how Palpatine had Operation Cinder, and he's like, if you guys can't protect me, then kill yourself. And he just has like all of these plans in order that are based on his desires if the Empire were to fall or if the Emperor were to be killed.
Right.
Except for instead of just orders, it's your whole personality. Like if you were to ask the supervisor, what's your favorite color? The droid voice tells you what Joel's favorite color was 200 years ago when he was alive.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. So, what
and
do
those
you
droids
think
that carried on the Emperor's orders with the it had like a blank screen dome helmet, and then the Emperor's face would show up when he was talking.
Yeah.
I forget what they're called.
Floating sentinels or something like that.
The fact that AT-AT has had has been able to actually have contact with the Republic secretly this whole time makes so much sense. As to like throughout the series, everyone was like, but if everything over here has been a secret since the Old Republic, where'd they get those Mud Trooper helmets? Or where did they get the RX series droid that's driving the bus? Like, they have a pipeline to the outside world, and maybe so that's how they're able to get things, but they just have to do it through this one covert channel.
Or was the Onyx Cinder the key to moving in and out?
Well, the ships, the emissary ship,
plated. It was plated with something that the things that electrocute all the ships coming in. It would
basically whatever the hull of the Onyx Cinder's made of, it doesn't attract the lightning bolts from the barrier. And to your point, Joel, those were we were right, those were called sentinels. Those sentinel droids were those floating, almost like Royal Guard looking droids with the Emperor's face in it, very similar. So what do you think is next? Like, obviously everybody stays on AT-AT and they try to continue the great work, but does the barrier go back up and the New Republic just says, don't ever talk about this again to the soldiers that were there? Or
I feel like they've blown up the barrier. Like the barrier's gone. Yeah. So the cat's out of the bag now. I mean, I feel like AT-AT is just here, and they find a way to continue a version of the great work. But of course, all road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I have a feeling that the theory that somehow AT-AT will eventually be siphoned and used to fund the First Order could potentially be true now. Now that it's not even protected, it's just a giant planet full of gold just sitting there.
And I'm just
it's interesting.
Sorry, I'm just thinking in a couple months, Andor Season 2 is going to start. And the whole thing is like Luthen Rail, Mon Mothma trying to come up with ways to fund the New Republic. Meanwhile, they actually have AT-AT the whole time.
Yeah, they're sitting on a planet filled with credits.
So they couldn't fund the rebellion, even though AT-AT is mining and storing credits in vaults as that's happening.
Yeah, and we're beyond the fourth wall, and we know it exists out there.
Yeah, that's gotta be frustrating.
Skeleton Crew is 7 years after Episode 6.
The Emperor is hiding a planet full of gold. The Emperor is hiding a planet full of gold. If only they could get intel on that.
At this point, it's like, does the Emperor even know? Is it just like hidden?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you would think that if he knew about it, the gold would be gone. Yeah, that's a good question. So maybe it's not the Chancellor that knows about it. Maybe it's someone else within the Republic that was in charge of that. Yeah. But then who would have sent the directive that the Jedi were traitors? That would have had to come from the Chancellor's office.
I think that it just goes out to anybody that receives messages. And then the barrier goes into place, and Yeah, it's very strange. Like if the Emperor would have known about it, he would have used those credits. They would have been stacking up. So it seems like that was a worldwide, like sends it out to anybody that can get it type of thing.
Sorry,
You know what I mean?
busy praying going on my house. Yeah,
It's okay.
But we do know that at some point at Akron had both separatists and the early Empire, the Dark Times Empire, on their planet fighting.
Yes.
So somewhere along there, probably towards the end of the Clone Wars, some separatist faction was on at Akron, and then probably taken out by the Dark Times Empire.
Yeah,
because they're using all their tech.
Yeah, there was you had the droid tank that went by at the very beginning, and those were very specific to the Trade Federation, then used by the Separatists.
Yeah,
so it's very interesting. I wonder if
that an AAT. It looked similar, but was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to go back
and I wonder if at some point AT-AT was so under wraps, because there's some things like, okay, for instance, like the JFK files, or for the longest time, like anything that had to do with UFOs or whatever, it was like the president could be made privy to them if he so desired, but the president's job is to run the country on a day-to-day basis. And it's like, hey, if you want to look at the JFK file, you can, but it's not going to help what's going on in our current situation. I wonder if there are certain people in the government for the Republic / Empire / New Republic that had some knowledge of AT-AT, but it seems like not. It seems like it just existed. Maybe we just poked a hole in the whole show, asking why the Empire didn't train it, because the Empire
the show sucks.
It was at SM-33 that scraped, like, took that that sign in the pillar on Akron that had coordinates to all the planets. So Tak Rennet had SM-33 remove the coordinates to Aten, and then he went there, and that was the last planet. I think there was like 6 or 7 of them. That they're all similar planets being mined for this purpose, and they all got drained one after another, and then Tak Rennet erased all coordinates to Aten and then fled there, so he can have it for himself. So I guess the big mystery is, who is Tak Rennet? Is he still alive? Or what did he do on his time at Aten before he died?
Yeah. Well, we know, thanks to freeze frame technology, that Tak Rennet is a Weequay. And, of course, the giant Weequay skull that's the iconography inside his vault, which kind of gave it away. So maybe he's Hondo's great-great-grandpappy.
Yeah.
Something.
Or Hondo himself.
The family.
Yeah.
I would love to know who he is and learn more about him, because it just seems so... He was so hyped up for it to just be this throwaway line. Oh yeah, he got stabbed by one of his concubines. Like, that's it? Like, nothing else profound that we need to know about
also, the fact that SM-33 has no information on him.
Yeah.
That's also kind of frustrating.
A little bit. Can we talk about how I really thought...
He has very selective memory.
Yeah, he does.
Say that I know anything about AT-AT.
Yeah. And all of a sudden it all comes back.
Can we talk about how, like, I was genuinely shocked and thought that Jod actually killed SM-33, and I was like, you jerk! What the hell? Like, I was so mad for a second. I was like, oh, I hope that those kids kick his ass. Oh, not my boy, not SM-33, but then he's literally just fine.
Yeah.
That's what my kid said right away.
I'm glad that we got to see C-3PO, with the wrong head for, an hour in Attack of the Clones. Otherwise, I would have been very distraught that was the end of SM-33, who was a great highlight of the show. So kind of a fun question as we get close to wrapping this up, so you guys can go about your regular lives. As, action figure enthusiasts, collectors, photographers, They give you a call over at Hasbro and they ask, you can make 3 characters into the vintage collection from season 1 of the Skeleton Crew. What are your 3 characters you're making?
Oh, that's so difficult because if it's 3, I can't make the crew of kids. So
yeah, just assume the kids are made.
I have to leave one out, and that would drive me crazy. So I can't do any of the kids.
Yeah,
so
assume
I
the
would
kids.
Definitely have to
We're getting the kids. They can be a background character. They can be whoever.
Oh, easy then. Okay, we're doing SM33, Brutus, and Vane.
Okay. What about you, Joel?
That's mine.
That's a solid 3. Vane is definitely on there for me. Brutus needs to be made. He's made enough. I also really like Gunter.
Dude, Gunter's great.
Yeah. Jaleel White, like
Space Urkel.
Yeah. To have a Steve Urkel action figure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That'd
so either him or SM33.
Okay.
But also Captain Silva.
Mention.
Captain Silva with the helmet and the lightsaber would be unreal.
Yeah, that would be. Honorable mention for me, as far as Glup Shittos goes, it has got to be Gleb, the Quarren pirate pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, his helmet was so cool.
What's with his tongue, dude? It looks like he doesn't have a jaw.
Yeah, he definitely looks, what'd you say, like he's got a weak chin?
Yeah.
His tongue's just kind of hanging.
Yeah, he's like, getting some interruption out here.
He's just got his tongue hanging. But man, seeing him in another one of those snub fighters, which this is now the second show that those pirate snub fighters have shown up in.
Mm-hmm.
Hasbro, come on, let's go. Let's get those pirate snub fighters. But yeah.
All right, here's my 3. You ready? So we're all in conjunction. We SM33 and Brutus. Okay. Here's my 3rd. All right, put them in like a little $25 pack if you want to. Catholips in the bathtub.
With the towel on it.
Because I'm a huge reader. I'm a fan of all like horror stories, and I love watching like horror little short stories on YouTube and stuff. Catholips is clearly a Cthulhu reference. And he would be super fun. And you can, similar to how like they didn't know what Max Rebo looked like, so they just had like legs inside the piano. You could do something like that where it's like a flat surface with like a water piece. So it could be just from like his chest up, but a Catholips would be freaking awesome. Just something from that Cthulhu style mythos
that would be awesome.
Would be fun. So I think we all agree we would love to see a season 2. Hopefully, it's weird because viewership plays a part, but at the same time, it's like we're all paying $10 a month or whatever it is for Disney Plus. Just make the show. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like TV where it's like, it doesn't directly affect your monetary value in the show. So hopefully we get a season 2. If not, we want to see some great tie-ins down the road from, especially from Jod. He could be a great comic book character. He has I could see him running into like Dr. Aphra. Like he would be a great Dr. Aphra adversary. I know that her comic book has come to an end, but that would be a really fun live action. Like him and Jackson would be just hilarious. I'm still talking. Yeah, they'd be amazing.
With him.
So it was a great series. Hopefully we get more of it. And everywhere we went, like I think that this was the most fun I'd ever had going to different worlds in a show so far in the Disney universe. Because in The Mandalorian, you had a lot of sand, you had some Tatooine, you had some this, you had some that, some Coruscant. We kind of stuck to safe spots. And of course, Book of Boba Fett is all on Tatooine. Kenobi had some interesting places, but again, just kind of not nothing like what the Skeleton Crew had. I mean, you had at Atten, which is like so strange, like the first Star Wars neighborhood we've ever seen, with like everything is so regulated, very Truman Show style. I felt like, and then you had the Pirates Hangout, which was amazing. It was very Treasure Planet feeling for those of us who grew up in the 90s. And then you had the it was funny because you had the I can't remember what it's called, but it was like Devil's Mountain or Devil's, Death Peak or whatever, ends up being the resort where you have like Munes and people like that bathing and Cthulhups and all that stuff. And then you had a Lanupa, you had the secret hideout where all of the gold was, which felt like, you guys remember the Jungle Book live action back in the day that had the snake in the treasure room?
Yeah.
That it felt like that to me. So you got a little bit of everything. There was so much good, just the planets and everything. The pirate ship coming through the dissolving barrier and stuff like that was freaking amazing. I think that, correct me if you guys disagree, I think that as far as visuals and new locations and stuff, this is by far the best we've gotten from a Disney Star Wars series.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely most original.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely most original. Like, yeah, I think this may be the strongest overall season of a live action Star Wars series since The Mandalorian season 1. Like, or maybe season 2, because season 2 was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Of Mandalorian. But yeah, like since the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, this is definitely the strongest like live action series that they've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just awesome. I think the marketing for this show has been phenomenal. Like even going out on a limb and doing things that Star Wars really does not do. Like we had a well-known 80s mainstream song that was just the song for the trailers for this series. And we had all these different versions. They had the original version that they did, and it fit perfectly. They did a cinematic, like, orchestral version, which also sounded really cool. They did it in Huttese. Like, they did a whole music video where, like, they translated the entire song of Major Tom into Huttese and sang it. And did it show up in this actual show at all? Nope. Not once. Not once. But it was
it got your attention. Yeah.
It was perfect for the marketing. Yeah.
So Disney, if you happen to be one of the people that sees this, typically as far as YouTube goes, we get like 35 to 100 views max on YouTube. But we get some good traction on Spotify and podcasts from Apple. So hopefully if somebody's listening to this, we love the show. I've heard of one person that didn't like the show. And it's not even somebody that I personally talked to. A friend of mine said, yeah, I heard this from so-and-so. And I was like, you delete that phone number right now.
Yeah, it's not even something we talk to anymore.
Yeah, I loved it. And it's funny because, dude, what happened the other day, and I'll wrap this up with this, but my boys were watching it before bed, and it was the episode that they were on Lanupa, and Jod really turns on the kids for the first time. And they didn't realize that we're just basically halfway through the season at that point. And at like 10 o'clock at night, my oldest son bursts into my bedroom and goes, so the bad guy's just going to get a lightsaber and the kids are going to go down the hole? What is going on? What's up with that? And he was so upset. But it's cool because my kids love Star Wars. But if I sit them down and make them watch like the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, like there's certain parts where they're just going to be disinterested, and this one was the first one that like felt like, whether you're a seasoned Star Wars veteran or you're just a young kid sitting down with your mom or your dad, it was like it had something for everybody, and it kept us in. And every week I was like, that was a good episode. Like even I think it was episode 3 when they're on at Akron, which felt very different from every other episode. Even though it felt different, I was like, wow, that was a little bit more serious. And it gave me, but I had all these questions afterward. I always wanted more. I never felt like the episode was running long. I never felt like I didn't connect with it. I remember liking certain episodes of The Acolyte. I remember particularly in episode 3 when it ended, I was like, what did I just watch? I did not connect with that at all.
You couldn't believe how good it was.
Oh yeah, that's what it was for sure.
It was Joe's favorite episode of the whole thing.
But episode 5, whenever we actually talked to Kymir, I was like, that feels like Star Wars. This one, every single episode, I was like, whatever that was, give me 5 more of those. But we'll wrap it up, dude. Thank you guys, Joel, Finn, so much for hanging out. You can find both these guys on Instagram. I'll plug their stuff in the description below. Check them out. They're super talented. They're on top of their stuff. And thank you guys for tuning in. Remember, the Force will be with you always. Here's hoping for a Skeleton Crew Season 2. And in the meantime, we look forward to Andor and so many other projects coming up soon. So y'all be safe. Guys, you want to give any parting words before we shut it down?
Thanks for having us. Much appreciated. Love talking Star Wars with you guys.
Yeah.
So, here's to many more.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah. Just celebrating the fact that we got the literal largest Chekhov's gun in this series. And Neil fired a giant cannon at a pirate ship.
Yes.
So much
we can never get too much Neil.
Never too much Neil. But yeah, this has been great. Glad we got to chat. Looking forward to the next one and what happens in the future. Check out Chiss Ascendancy podcast. Watch on YouTube.
Yes, sir.
If you feel like it, check out Radis Force Dad and Findor Moon on Instagram. Yeah.
Appreciate you guys tuning in. Remember, the Force will be with you always. And until next time, stay safe. Thanks for tuning in.